Yeah, it looks like we got quite a crowd. Oh, how would you like to do this? We can go through like the Figma document that you have. We can start with that and have some discussion around that. I can also walk you guys through the tokenomic model playground in a sort of spreadsheet that I was working on as well.
Oh, I had no ideas. I was under I thought you were going to lead this meeting.
Sure. Okay. Two screens. All right, can you see my Discord? The infinite mirror.
Yeah, I see that for mirror.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah,
would you like to share that link in the chat maybe for those, or would you want to maybe in the Tokenomics community chat? Chatting governance maybe, yeah.
Okay.
If you're comfortable to do that, yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. It is a working sort of model. This is more for exploratory purposes. Like I think I was saying before, my goal here was to see what could be and how theoretical numbers could sort of impact each other so we can better understand the relationship of this super formula for the time being that we're working on. And so there are a lot of numbers here. This is not meant to be human readable in such a sense, though I can sort of help translate this, and then maybe at the end of the call we can actually play with some of these numbers, and individually you guys can do so as well. So in this very simplistic model, we're assuming two marketplaces. That's a little bit more robust from one, and the marketplaces themselves have a score, right? We've talked numerous times about a sort of marketplace ranking and how that can actually feed back into the rewards or the emission rewards that they get. And so we have marketplace 1, which ends up having a score of 92%, which is very high. This is an aggregate of some of the variables that we were talking about before, as well as two, I'm calling them handicap variables, just like in golf, sort of bonuses and buffs that you could temporarily have based off of some conditions. Before we get to that, in our assumed formula, we'd like the total percent to add up to 100%. So we can change these numbers. We could change this to 5% and this to 15%. We could change this to 20% and remove this variable entirely. The point being, though, is we can decide what the upper limit is on performance according to a certain behavior or metric within the formula. And I think it makes sense for these ceilings to be determined by Loadpipe itself, sort of weighted partially against what the community thinks, but also responsibly handled so that people can't game the system. Yeah, does that make sense to you guys?
I have a question, James. These ceilings, okay, it should be decided by the community, but is there any way to try to figure out which one is better more than just speculation or setting an arbitrary number?
I think initially it is going to be educated speculation with launch, and then as we get experience with the Hamza marketplace, we're going to be better informed to determine the weights for these things. There's a lot of things we don't know, and I think what's important is also going to change over time, depending on the number of users or vendors or participants that we currently have. Right? So initially, for example, you're not necessarily going to be able to build up customer service time or measure disputes. There might not even be disputes for a period of time. And so initially when we're spinning up, we could adjust these weights. And I think that makes sense from a DAO point of view. And correct me if I'm wrong or if anyone else thinks something else, but ultimately I hope that the wisdom of the crowd will prevail in that regard.
How do we arrive at a percentage of the ceiling?
This is arbitrary. This is just for experimenting here.
So you have escrow, the escrow time ceiling is 10%, but it's at 7% for this marketplace. How is that 7% of the 10% calculated?
Yeah, so each one of these variables will be calculated based off of whatever data we're ingesting, and I don't know what that looks like. So in this spreadsheet, this is just an arbitrary number. What I think makes the most sense is we can have like some sort of baseline metrics for each one of these variables, but we can also compare them relative to other marketplaces. For example, if half of every order is resulting in disputes, right? When we launch, maybe there's like some technical difficulties, like in some capacity, then our dispute time could be 10% relative to the metrics of the other marketplaces who are experimenting during the alpha stage. So maybe instead of having 50% disputes, you have 45% disputes, and that can, or like 45% disputes, like weighted against the total amount of participants on a specific marketplace, then you could sort of weight that against other marketplaces to receive this score. So like,
well, I mean, the thing the concern that I have is that whatever we like, so in this construction of the formulas, all that like computation to arrive at a percentage has to be smart contract computation, right?
Sure.
So like all those formulas have to be defined with on-chain data and then have to be like executed. It's on-chain execution. And so yeah, I mean, I guess. Okay, so we don't really have a good definition of what goes into, what metrics go into that.
Correct. Yeah, each one of these is going to be its own thing. I would anticipate you guys are doing like maybe a daily. So you could do a weekly to save on gas, or you could even do twice a day, but like sort of just update of these variables. I'm not sure what is going to be feeding into these, but if you have dispute time, right, for a specific marketplace and we're saving that data, whenever like a dispute occurs, then it would be looking at maybe the moving average of disputes over like a period of time, how long they've lasted, and weighing that comparative to the number of participants on the platform. Like it shouldn't be weighted a lot, right? If there's only one vendor and one buyer, or maybe it should. So that's like a future conversation. Specifically with this, it's just, okay, let's assume we're measuring these correctly, however we are, and looking at how much of an impact they have on the reputation score or like a specific marketplace. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's arbitrary. This is like playing with numbers, sort of experimenting, if you will. So this will all be robust. It will not be living in a spreadsheet. We'll have some actual formulas, probably doing this through code as well. And I think like one of the first steps for that, or reaching that point, is defining what some of these numbers could look like. Not specifically the marketplaces themselves, because these are like arbitrary metrics, but rather like what we want to do on the protocol level, I think is maybe some of the more impactful stuff. So,
okay.
Anyways.
Should I?
Yeah, so we have some handicap. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like maybe some people are shy to clarify, but maybe I'll just reiterate in my more. I think I'll try to say it in more simple terms, and maybe you clarify if I'm interpreting it correctly, and then maybe that can help others. James?
Yeah, please. Yeah, definitely.
So essentially, this spreadsheet, the point of this is to incentivize good behaving marketplaces in the protocol and disincentivize, or at least not incentivize, what the protocol's formula for bad behaving marketplaces. Right, so there's these different kinds of criteria that we're outlining, and based on that formula, the higher scored marketplaces would get higher percent of the emissions, which is new tokens being minted to them versus other marketplaces in the ecosystem or protocol, right?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful explanation.
I have a feeling, I don't want to point people out, but I think some people are newer to crypto, even I'm kind of, and then the emissions. So then those tokens, obviously that marketplace would receive them at their smart contract wallet, which could be an individual or a multi-sig DAO, and then they could distribute it to their marketplace how they wish, right? We, as a protocol, doesn't know how they'll
Correct.
distribute it. So
correct.
Well,
So,
to be fair, I think. Oh, sorry. Just to clarify there, I think that the DAO, like we don't have this entirely sketched out yet, but I think like what I would like to see is that like we have a DAO factory for marketplace DAOs. And that DAO factory has like sort of a token receiver contract, which token receiver / distributor contract. So then when it receives emissions, it is forced to emit to the different like actors at the marketplace level according to like sort of another formula we define. So for instance, like the marketplace governance might be able to say like, well, we're going to distribute 80% to the vendors on our market, right? Or we're going to distribute 80% to the governors on our market, right? So they get to choose like, ideally, and this is just sort of my future construction, is they would get to decide the percentages as they're distributed to the actors at the marketplace level. And this formula is like the way that the protocol DAO decides how much of whatever percentage is being allocated to marketplaces in general, which marketplaces get what percentage of that allocation. And then there are like a couple of other actors at the marketplace or like at the protocol level, which also get some percentage of emissions. But yeah, I mean, I would like it to not like, I don't think it's like best to just throw it into their treasury. I think it's better to throw it into some contract that forces distribution, and then they can vote to have it distribute 100% to their treasury if they want. But then that would be something that would be controlled by marketplace governance.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. So just sketching here very quick. This spreadsheet, all it is determining how big of a circle the marketplace gets, and then what Bo is saying is based off of configurations on a marketplace level, based off of their DAO, they determine who gets what percent of what. So maybe vendors get this much, and maybe the market maker gets this much of the big circle we give them. Maybe it's 50-50, and I think that should be governance based for them individually.
I like it. Yeah, I would also prefer that.
Yeah. So not covered in this spreadsheet. This is the macroeconomics, the marketplace specific distribution of emissions was further conversation, I think.
Should we try to encourage questions at this point? Is there others?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
So I'm a little confused as to I'm getting its arbitrary numbers at this moment, but not everything would be 10% of the, like, everything has a ceiling for 10%, right? But
Yep.
How would we go about setting an initial actual value for real reviews, customer service time? We would need to flush that out before actually writing down the initial contracts, right?
Yeah, so specifically within the spreadsheet, the fact that we're using percentages is kind of arbitrary. These could be points, if you will, like escrow time could be 50 points, unique buyer rep could be 2 points as far as the ceiling goes. So you can get a 10 out of 10 or a 15 out of 10. It's a very simplistic model. But yes, we would need smart contract behavior, which would measure each one of these metrics. And I think that's partially like a data design sort of thing. Like some of these can actually be relatively complex. For example, if we're looking at real reviews, we're going to need some sort of method to determine whether or not reviews are like real or fake, and then maybe even have subcategories within that. For example, maybe we weight reviews with photos that accompany the review themselves, or like maybe we rate reviews from verified buyers a little higher. And so each one of these things, like Bo was saying before, is going to be its own solution on the smart contract level.
I mean, it's just to also maybe help. It's like a report card. It's like a score, right? So ceiling is just the max amount you could receive in that bucket, and he just has 10 buckets at 10% each, so they're all equally weighted to make 100%. And yeah, of course, this is a first draft, so if we want to say real reviews is more important, we can make that higher ceiling of the percent or the weighted amount of the score of the report card of the marketplace. Essentially, we're trying to kind of oversee the marketplaces, which actually there's been some discussions with other projects and others. So we're trying to kind of oversee the marketplace. This is basically a way to try to ensure marketplaces are doing good things, which I don't think is attempted even in Web 2. There's not really anything really like this, right? That Is there anything we can look at that could be like this? Is another question, James?
Most marketplaces have a scoring methodology that they use for vendors. So nothing as sophisticated as this, but they have a scoring methodology, which is usually super secret squirrel, to reverse engineer a rating that they will give to a vendor, and it will have much simpler categories. So if you wanted to use an open database, so for example, in this case, Mall gives access to their database. It's completely anonymized. You can kind of use that to not reverse engineer, but to get an idea for the kind of things it is that they prioritize for vendor scoring. My question was going to be, how comfortable are we with the weighting changing? So obviously at the beginning, when we're trying to encourage X, we can drive the weighting to do that because we won't necessarily have like a ton of reviews. But the further in we move into the program, we would then maybe want to prioritize something else. What does that look like? Is that something that's permissible, or is that verboten?
I think that should be encouraged for a number of reasons. One is like sort of maintaining the integrity of the system itself. People are smart, people try to game things, and maybe eventually, when we have more users onboarded, there are going to be certain metrics which are much easier to achieve based off of certain marketplace actions, even of the DAO. And if they're that easy to achieve, that means they arguably have a disproportionate impact on the results that are the emissions that should be rewarded to the marketplace, right? Like if you only have to do one very easy thing to get a 10% in one of these categories, then everyone's going to be doing that. And consequently, we should probably reduce the total ceiling for that specific variable. And I think that the best way to do that would be through like Loadpipe level DAO governance, maybe with marketplace representation. But
I think the best example, I mean, and it's not a perfect example, but the best example is Maker, MKR. So Maker is the DAO that controls the DAI stablecoin. And basically it's like their DAO establishes a work stream, right? Which is like an off-chain, like weekly they have an update to their parameters. And the parameters that they control, again, are a little bit more simplistic. It's like collateralization ratios and interest rates on vaults. So like a vault is where someone would lock up Ethereum and take out what is functionally an over-collateralized loan in DAI. They create DAI through this like vault. And so like their underlying collateral is locked and they have a DAI loan, and the governance only changes the interest rate on taking out a loan denominated in specific currencies, and then also the collateralization ratio. So like the governance actions would be to do things like change the collateralization ratio from 150% to 160% in a period of like high market volatility. Or they would change the interest rate if they see like the price of DAI trending sort of like if it's trending towards $1, then they might increase the interest rate in order to, or decrease the interest rate to incentivize people creating DAI and then selling it on the open market, right? And then they have a work stream that evaluates the impact in the ecosystem and then makes recommendations based on how they see the ecosystem changing. And I imagine we would do a sort of a similar thing. It's like we would have some periodic governance vote on like what we think we need to prioritize in terms of like what we want to encourage marketplaces to do. And then we would have a team that like evaluates, well, what does that look like? Like, what is the health of like each of these marketplaces? How has this like change affected their behaviors? Did it have the intended effect? And then they make a recommendation to say, okay, well, maybe we should to reconfigure the weights because people are gaming the review system. So like, let's bring down the review weight and bring up like the unique buyer rep weight so that people aren't just like creating, I don't know. And yeah, so people would make recommendations and then present them to a governance board, and then the governance would vote to change the weights again on some time period.
Yeah.
Sorry,
exactly.
maybe this is a dumb question, but what do we mean by marketplaces here?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I wanted to clarify this just because I think there is always this confusion. And even with Nina's comment, I'm hoping she's on the same page. Because when we said vendor rating, this is not really rating vendors. This is rating marketplaces. So we are starting with Hamza. Hamza is a proof of concept marketplace. But the idea is we have multiple marketplaces, multiple Amazons, multiple Hamzas, and a Loadpipe protocol is governing all of them and incentivizing them for good behavior and rating the performance of Hamza. But the idea is there's not just Hamza. So I hope that's
Okay.
clear. I was also thinking to clarify that for those. So this is this formula James is making is for the Loadpipe protocol, which is governing marketplaces such as Hamza and rewarding good what it deems good behavior with token of Loadpipe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But this will be sorry, just I'm trying to figure out this in my head. This is just for bonification of good behavior in total of the marketplace, which is composed by several individuals, correct?
Yeah, correct for now. So everything from L to R is measuring marketplace reputation and revenue relative to other marketplaces and revenue. This is something that we need in some capacity when we're considering the macroeconomics, like our emission schedule, how many tokens we're distributing across various different marketplaces. And so these are just theoretical marketplaces. This doesn't have to be Hamza, this could be something else. And yeah, we're measuring relative performance. And the reason it's relative performance is because we might be distributing a certain arbitrary amount of new Loadpipe tokens as emission rewards, but we need to determine who our best actors are on the marketplace level. So that like the goal isn't just getting a perfect score in all of these. That's impossible to do. It's rather getting the best score your marketplace can relative to other marketplaces. So you're not just good, you're the best.
Exactly. And this information might be public somehow. Like the marketplaces know what are their scores. No?
Yeah, I think it should be.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
Okay. And as much marketplaces exist, the more diluted the distribution is.
Correct. So, well, yes, if you have 50 different marketplaces and they all have the same score, then they're getting 1/50th of whatever our emissions are going to be, right?
Well, I also think,
Okay.
I don't know if you talk about this, James, or not, or thought about this, but we might not be distributing all at the beginning as much. We might have it where there's more released later to allow for more adoption so that, although, of course, anybody coming in early in any kind of ecosystem usually is rewarded most generously, but I'd still think we would maybe allocate more as it grows. Like, I think we would not distribute all. Again, it's out of my range of knowledge, but I don't think we would unlock all of it or whatever the terms are. So I think it would kind of would come in later, hopefully, in my opinion.
So this is a conversation Bo and I had, and this is kind of more of where I want to lead the conversation, I suppose, is there are many different approaches that we can have as far as like the total supply and how we emit relative to the total supply. So we can pursue like a model we've seen quite often where we mint an arbitrarily large amount of tokens, let's say 30 trillion tokens, and they're in escrow, or 95% of them are in escrow, and then we release tokens from escrow to token holders. Alternatively, what we can do is we have 100% circulating supply of tokens. Let's say we're starting off with 10 million, and then we can mint more tokens. We can add more tokens relative to some other variables. Maybe it's like the revenue that Loadpipe is earning, something like that. And they're very, very different approaches, primarily from, I think, the psychological component of people who are using these tokens, right? Like it's a scary thing if you're looking at a protocol and you see only 15% of the total supply is circulating. Like in the back of your mind, you always have that fear, whether justified or not, that like the project could just rapidly introduce some of the escrow supplied in some capacity. And so like I personally favor like having an arbitrary initial supply and then minting new tokens and maybe doing that paired with some sort of burn function. Sorry for the monologue.
Does that create some kind of inflation? on your own token?
Yeah, so I have this column here, and we're kind of skipping ahead, but it's daily dilution. So you can see if we were to mint in a vacuum X supply or X amount of new tokens, how that would impact the price of the token. So we are looking at that. These are sort of like endpoint variables, and really like besides just determining some arbitrary variables for the marketplaces, where we can really learn a lot is by playing with the protocol variables here. So one of the things like I wanted to talk to you guys about so we can get some real numbers or realer numbers is what we anticipate the percentage fee Loadpipe is going to be collecting on marketplace revenue. Like this is an arbitrary 7%. We could do 60% like Amazon, which I don't think you guys want to do. And we could play with it and see what happens when we have 1%. But like, what do you guys think initially on launch?
I just want to clarify, maybe David's the best to answer it, and I believe he said he wanted to talk to you about it, but the 50% is not just pure commission off the top. It includes shipping and other services as well, just to make sure that's clear. So we have to just, what value are we providing? I think actually there is a chart. Maybe David could help pull it up, or different categories have different percentages in Amazon Market. It's not like a flat percent. It depends on the product category, and that's their base fee. And then they have all kinds of fees. It does get up to like 50 or 60, but there's of course the fulfillment fee, the warehousing fee, they have PPC fee. So it's not just like a flat percent. So I don't know if we should consider it in multiple parts, but it's definitely not like one fee that they have. They have a whole list.
Yeah, so my follow-up question with that would be how much of that is justified in terms of the service they're actually providing, and then how much of it is actually revenue? How much are they taking home?
I think Bo shared an article recently in Discord about they don't really disclose that in their numbers because they mix AWS and they mix other businesses in their financials in their public records. They don't break down their marketplace profits division. So nobody really knows how much they make. They try to say they actually lose money in the marketplace and the way they do their numbers, but nobody seems to believe that. I don't know if David might be the best. Do you have?
I think they could. Yeah, I was gonna say sorry.
But I'll go ahead. David, do you have an opinion or a response about like the fee structure of Amazon and how we could replicate that or learn from that or apply that?
Well, as you mentioned, the fees from Amazon are very diverse. They affect almost everything you do, right? And the percentages also, as you mentioned, depends on categories, etc., right? But normally at the end of the day, they take like 45-50% of your revenue in fees, right? So do we actually want to charge that much? But of course, this is 50% when you use FBA.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was saying.
If you don't use FBA,
yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
it gets reduced a lot.
So, again, this is the beautiful thing about this project, but we're kind of merging traditional e-commerce with crypto. But FBA, for those that don't know, maybe even James or others, fulfilled by Amazon.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, we're all learning. We're all sharing different skill sets. FBA means fulfilled by Amazon, and the other option is FBM, which is fulfilled by merchants, which means it's shipped from outside of Amazon's own warehouse by the merchant or a third-party service. So, but I definitely don't. I hope all of us don't want to charge nearly as much as they do. And there's another factor we all got to keep in mind that Hamza or any other marketplace also needs their own fee structure. This is just the protocol level fee, right? This is not the marketplace fee. So I personally vote to be as low as possible. I was even saying to some people verbally is almost negative because we almost want to incentivize them by paying them to transact at the beginning potentially. In some form, maybe it's not directly in maybe other ways it's a negative, but I also want to make sure we all take into account that there's other fees that other actors need to charge, such as the marketplaces themselves.
The load protocol fees will be charged to the marketplace, right? And then the marketplace will have its own fees for the service of the marketplace, right?
That's a great question. but I think it's paid at the time of transaction. I don't know if somebody here wants to help, maybe Bo or Garo or others want to weigh in there, or maybe John. It would probably be at the time of the sale.
I'm sorry.
And
What
my
was
understanding was it would be both.
So Dave, you want to repeat the question?
Yes, yes. We are talking here. We are talking here about the load protocol charging a fee, right? But that fee, I assume, should be charged to the marketplaces, right? And then the marketplaces will have their individual fees, because if someone uses the load protocol for creating their own marketplace, which is completely inside of us, we will be charging them the load protocol fee, right? And then that person or that team will create the fees they consider in their marketplace. Or can we force the marketplaces to charge the load fee to the consumers somehow?
We can. Yeah, this is actually a good question. And yeah, I mean, I think because it's tricky because as we've been evolving our understanding of the way the escrow system works, we know that we can extract a fee, but I'm like, now I'm trying to think of how do we enforce that a marketplace uses the protocol escrow contract? Do we want there to be a protocol escrow contract? Yeah, I mean, John, I'm like, this is the first I've given some thought to this. Do you have any input here?
Let me think about it as well.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying?
The question is about whether or not to force marketplaces to use the official protocol escrow contract, and in so doing, allow the escrow contract to take fees for the protocol.
Yeah, because I think the way, when we've been talking
the
about
idea was to not actually have transaction fees from the protocol, but take the fee out of the protocol in other ways. I think in more complicated ways, and I think that made sense because I thought we had just decided to not go with the idea of taking fees directly from every transaction in the protocol.
Yeah, I mean that's I know. I mean, I was going to bring that up too.
I think that's a marketplace's job.
Well, there's so much to discuss here.
So
yeah,
Sure, I think it's a marketplace's job because we'll charge the marketplaces, and the marketplaces pass that on to their.
Well, there's another factor.
Sorry, to give you some more insights about what I'm thinking is, I can create a marketplace using the load protocol, right?
Yes.
So I assume that the load protocol meant some expenses in whoever created it, right? So if I'm using that service, it will be part of my operating expenses, right? How much costs me to use the load protocol for having my own marketplace? That's what I was thinking. That's why I assumed the load protocol will be charging me, and then I will do whatever charges I want to my users.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important discussion, and there has been over the months been a lot of different. John mentioned we were even considering not taking a fee on the protocol level. We were originally talking about just a pure staking model for becoming either a vendor or maybe a fee for becoming a marketplace, as you mentioned. There's even been discussions about carry and earning from carry. I don't know.
So
what is James' thoughts?
think,
James, you're familiar with some of those discussions, right?
not in the entire history, but I think it's similar in some ways to nuclear power plant versus burning coal. So, or maybe some other energy generation resource. But we have the barriers to entry for vendors. And if we expect to get capital for the Loadpipe protocol via exclusively staking, those numbers are going to be higher. And if those numbers are higher, that disincentivizes small vendors from participating. For example, if the escrow requirement for a vendor to participate in a marketplace is not $50, but it's $2,000, then we're going to have less vendors, very likely. And what we could potentially do instead is have a very, very small fee, maybe 0.5%, maybe 1%. And what that would allow us to do is like any expenses that they're incurring, maybe it's gas fees, something like that. This is a number that's directly related to that. So we're never operating at a loss, right? This could, according to David, like in terms of operating costs for Loadpipe, this could initially literally equal whatever costs that we're paying, or maybe even be negative if we have some sort of war chest. But like, I don't think we want to accomplish this exclusively through escrow, because if we do that, that's going to hinder user adoption, and it also doesn't scale with expenses necessarily. It's like a one-time thing, right?
What? How is there a percentage Loadpipe fee if we're not doing it on escrow transacted? That's money flowing through the system. Where else would there be a percentage fee?
Yeah, so escrow in this, I think I understand. So this escrow is the escrow required in order to get a seat at the table, right? This isn't the escrow that is required for like a specific individual order, right? I think those are two different things.
So yeah. So we're talking about two different. Yeah, exactly. So maybe maker stake requirement would be, and vendor stake requirement would be better. Because when we talk about escrow, we talk about the escrow of a transaction, the escrow of an order,
Yeah, we've been
more or less, right? Which is how we're,
Yeah, we've been calling
Is that
it
how we
stake.
got down this path? When you said escrow, did you mean? Oh, you meant that.
I think you
That's
meant
what took us down this path, I think, correct?
in our
Yeah, we should come back then.
Yeah, in our terminology, we call it staking to become a vendor or marketplace, versus escrow. In our, at least how we've been calling it, is for a buy-sell transaction.
Terminology.
So I think this is like an extremely important conversation, which will inform like tokenomics as well as like some of the things David has to be concerned about. But like how do you guys want to make money with this? Like we can do a percentage fee on escrow, right? Not the staking. We can do purely just staking, right? Those are kind of like our two
This
options.
is the most important.
Well,
question.
there's other ways. I mean, the other way is needing this token for the judges. It's like the native token for judging and disputes. And I mean,
that would require them to purchase it, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the demand side.
Well,
There's money from yeah.
But there could be fees
there's two
on that.
mechanisms of revenue generation, right? There is a fee on volume that passes through the protocol, and then there's token value accrual, right? Those are the two possible ways that we could generate revenue. And then marketplaces are different, because marketplaces can have sponsored items, right? And they can do all kinds of like deals on top. They can sell ads on their website, and like marketplaces can have different revenue generating mechanisms. But in terms of like the protocol can possibly make money in two ways. One is a fee on all transactions that pass through the protocol, and the other is token value accrual. And token value accrual does not necessarily mean that the token goes up in value on a per unit basis, right? Like it could just mean that the token is going up in value on a market cap basis, right? Like if we're continuing to emit tokens and the value of the token keeps on going down, but we're emitting, like it's staying relatively stable and we're emitting tokens, then that is still technically like revenue positive. But those are the two possible mechanisms to make money, right? And like the token value accrual.
Exclusive. Yeah.
What about?
Yeah.
I just want to point out
What
they're not
about
mutually
carry?
exclusive
Isn't
items.
carry
Sure.
carry would be one of those two, or not?
Carry, I would say, ties in. I mean, carry, yeah, technically possible. Although I'm less and less convinced that it makes sense, just from like a smart contract perspective.
Carry is just a bonus.
Carry
Just
would
think of
be.
carry as like something we could do maybe as like a bonus for extra revenue, but not make it part of like the core calculation
Yeah.
of how we
Yeah.
make revenue.
I can't even remember who I talked to about this, but I think it's worth sharing. They said you could give the buyer different escrow choices that gives them different bonuses and rewards. Like higher risk, higher reward escrow that could allow us to do carry more or invest or so it's like if somebody wants to be really risk averse, they could choose. It's like different levels on the way the transaction is done, and we could incentivize them to go ways that we would prefer, benefit more from them to go. If that makes sense.
It is possible.
Can-
It is
can I ask-
possible. Sorry, go ahead. Well,
Yeah.
let me just finish this thought and then you go ahead. But it is possible, but like literally the calculation of gas fee for a swap versus like interest gained, like we would have to model out and figure out like and it would take some time. It's obviously not like MVP, and it's something if we were going to consider, we would have to do some modeling about of just like figuring out what it costs to do a swap when you're entering into the escrow contract, and then a swap out of the escrow contract versus the interest gained while in escrow. And I think for that we have to like have an understanding of like what the average escrow time period is, right? Because like if average escrow time is longer, obviously like it can make a little bit more sense. But like and then like also on the value of the transaction, right? Because sometimes if we're processing an order for $15, then it very likely does not make any sense at all. Because maybe like that swap. I mean, we looked at it the other day with Martin, and even on like Uniswap or like on Optimism, a swap like that is going to cost like $1. And so like on a $15 transaction, like swapping twice to get $2 will cost $2. Do we get $2 in interest on? Is it possible to get $2 in interest on $15 on $13 over the course of the average lockup time, which let's say is a week? I think that's unlikely.
We could ask,
again, it's something that we can model out in the future.
We could ask Do Kwon or SBF. They might have some solutions.
That's true. They might be getting into something. That's true. What is that? Some great project he's cooking. Yeah, maybe we'll get in on that. But sorry, go ahead, James. You had something to say.
That was a joke.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Yeah, no, yeah. So, yeah, not staking, but specifically this sort of escrow. Are we not batching that? Like, from a vendor point of view, is it really on the individual item level, one specific tiny escrow contract for the user, or can we not like batch it by day or even like week with some sort of load up that they do, anticipated based off of their revenue in order to mitigate gas fees?
Yeah, they will be batched. It gets really like the releases will be batched, and like there will be some like gas mitigation there. It's not on a per item level, but it's on a per vendor order level. Is like so the send, right? Like there's no way to batch the send, right? So on deposit, right? And it'd be a deposit on a per vendor order basis. That's 100% going to have to be an individual swap, right? Because we just can't batch that, right? It's going to be people paying at different times for different orders and so on and so forth. We can batch release, which theoretically reduces the gas cost of the exit swap, right? But again, that entry swap, right? That's the question. And again, I don't know for sure because we don't have like real numbers and we haven't quite modeled it out yet. But my inkling is that the swap fee versus the interest on 7 days might not be worth the squeeze, but it's on our mind.
Okay, so just pulling things back because I think we only have 7 more minutes allocated for this call. This load percentage fee cell that I have here is just a very useful number for determining everything else. I think this should be a number that we don't issue. We should collect some sort of percentage fee, and that should be based off of whatever our costs are for operating all of this, just like what you were talking about. I think modeling that is important. But we can assume, at least according to what Mike was saying, that this should, at the very least, be amounting to zero from like a revenue perspective. It should equally match whatever our costs incurred is for operating this marketplace. Is that correct, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's difficult to predict.
I mean,
Yeah.
how much you are gonna spend, but you cannot control how much you are gonna get in income. Because if you set a percentage, that will depend on how many people joins or how many marketplaces or whatever, right? So as that, maybe you exceed or maybe you don't achieve the figure that you want.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like, these numbers all exist inside of a vacuum. Like, this 15,000 could arbitrarily be $1 or $50,000. And so, like, this is more just informing what our ratios are, if that makes sense. Like, if we're collecting a fee, like if we're earning money in some capacity, then, or let's say if we earn $1,000 somehow, maybe it's the fee on revenue that passes through like the escrow, maybe it's token value accrue, whatever that is. If we're earning $1,000, how many more tokens would we be emitting to vendors is kind of like what I'm trying to figure out here.
And we're asking the question how we're going to take that fee out. Is that correct? Whether we're going to
Yeah,
do it
I think that's.
Yeah, I think that's a question for us, John.
Yeah.
Like I think we haven't quite. Yeah, it's just like a complication that seems obvious now, but like I don't think we've
If
given
you
a lot
wanted
of
to take
thought.
money through escrow, right? Would it not just be easier for everybody if we took that percentage from the marketplaces, but if we wanted to take some of it based on escrow, or like based on volume, like money flow through the protocol, could we not just charge a percentage based on how much order flow came from that marketplace through the? I didn't say that very well, but do you know what I'm getting at?
Oh,
there?
you mean aggregate, right? Like.
Oh, so you're saying
Yeah.
so when we do emissions, we like net out a percentage of like what we're charging at the emissions point rather than doing it like by taking it on a per transaction basis.
Yeah. But
Okay, and then we
base
just
that on something like some measure of volume from the marketplace or something.
Yeah, that's a way of doing it so we don't have to like take the percentage fee at the protocol level in the escrow contract. Marketplaces can have their own escrow, and then we can just see how much like volume they're doing through those escrow contracts.
It wouldn't change the fact that we're taking it wouldn't change the fact that we're taking a percentage of order flow revenue, but it would just change how we're doing it in a way that maybe would be more convenient for everybody.
And that's sort of what I'm. No, because that's sort of what I mean when I say like we can either take a percentage fee or we can do value accrual to the token, right? And if like we take that percentage and we like literally buy and burn, right?
Exactly.
That percent, like those tokens, right, through open market orders, then that's Or
so the second thought is that the token is a utility token. So we could, if we can figure out like the right ratios and formulas and whatnot, we can maybe just take our fee out of the fact that it's a utility token without having to look at anything like order volume or anything like that.
what do you mean?
Clarify?
So it's a utility token, so people will need it. Yeah, it's value accrual basically, but the utility makes it so that people will need it, and we can just extract value out of that.
You mean like introducing extra supply and then selling on the open market?
It could be one way, or just making people buy the token in.
But yeah, then we're doing the same thing, right? We're introducing new supply and then selling the token.
Yeah.
People are buying it.
Okay, so I suppose we are wrapping up soon. And so I guess my final thoughts on this is like, so this spreadsheet deals with sort of a subset of emissions. And it's specifically a loose calculation of how we're emitting to marketplaces at the protocol level. But there's two things that I would ask is one, there's these sort of like Loadpipe global variables, but we should maybe introduce all the other actors that exist at the protocol level. So like Justice would have a percentage of emissions and maybe some sort of like little controller box that determines our like percentage that we're allocating to those different actors, right? So the actors at the protocol level would be vendors, judges, and marketplaces, let's just say for now, and then some sort of like controller box of like what percentage are we at the protocol level issuing directly to those. And then second is, yeah, John is getting at this good idea of like, we do need to understand like what do people need the token for, right? And what are the different buy and sell pressures of the token, right? Because like emissions should generally either be like people are holding for increased, like vendors might want to hold more of the token as they get more of it in order to be able to do more volume, do more escrow. Marketplaces might want to be able to hold more of it to be able to engage in more voting at the protocol level. But like judges will probably want to sell the token. Vendors will, or like buyers, if we emit to them, will probably want to sell the token. Who are the must buyers, right? Initially, it's marketplaces and it's also vendors but like getting an idea of like where the buy and sell pressure exists at like the sort of global level, I think would be nice.
Yeah. So I think that makes a lot of sense within the token value accrual, like sort of revenue model. And boiling that down, as I understand it, we would essentially be looking at how we can measure demand for the token, right? Like pure macroeconomics, like how do we measure demand?
Yeah. Well, because and then again, it's like if we can, because if we can identify the different parties that we'll be emitting to, and the rough calculation of how we'll be deciding who gets the percentage of those tokens, then we can start like get an idea of like how often do we want to emit, how much do we want to emit, how does like an initial supply change this, and like how do we distribute, like let's call it the cold start supply, right? Because there will be a cold start supply and then there will be like a continual emission. And then we can like, again, if we can identify some numbers of like, then we can play with the idea again and have some numbers to back it up of what does it look like when we don't emit tokens but only emit out of the cold start supply, and then that just gets depleted over time. What does it look like when, like, what if they are governed by two curves, right? Where we have our cold start supply, which goes down in a curve fashion over time, and then we have emissions which rise according to some curve, right? Defining those curves would also be nice in terms of like tokenomics and getting an idea, again, of these like demand supply dynamics.
So I think regardless of our revenue earning strategy, that's something we'll absolutely want to tackle. Just from like a DAO like protocol level, just like understanding what the actual price per token is, so not just this in a vacuum sort of scenario. That said, I think we still want
for a second
Sure.
and ask James, how far do you think you could get with that?
I think that's going to be a lot of one-on-one conversations.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking like how far, because to get a really good picture of this, we'll need to create simulations, and the simulations will get increasingly more complex. But I'm wondering, like, how far do you think you could get, just off the top of your head, trying to simulate that using Excel sheets? Because that could be a start. And I would recommend actually Excel, not this, because Excel has like more functions and like mathematical stuff.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to get back to you on that because we're looking at measuring. We can certainly like break down this demand variable, right? So what Bo's describing is what is the demand, right? And then what is that a function of? So we're going to have those variables from there and then sort of breaking them down, similar to this market reputation score that we have. And then when we have all of those variables, like, so what is the demand from like a judge, right? Then I think that's going to be an open forum conversation, like what you guys think, understanding the value for like specific vendors to judge their own marketplace and putting a dollar value on that.
So if we start doing this, if we start trying to model this in Excel, like maybe it could be a collaborative effort between like me, you, and Bo, or something like that, or maybe you and Bo, or whoever wants to jump in on that. Like if we were to start, we might find that Excel is just not the right tool for doing that, but it might lead us to the right tool for doing that. And we might be able to get a start of modeling some of this stuff before we actually build like a more complicated simulation.
Yeah,
Or maybe
so
that would
it's-
just turn into a more complicated simulation.
Excel is the quick and dirty.
Yeah.
Eventually, when we understand
It's
things
usually a
better,
good
we're
start.
probably looking at Python and actually doing
I was
some.
about to say, I think this is a good start for identifying the various variables, because like sort of like you have here, right? Like it'd be nice to have the variables and then have sort of like a stepwise progression of like day by day. These are what the values look like, and then export to that to a graph where we can like visualize how things are changing over time.
We might also discover that there are tools that we're not aware of that are made to do the sort of like modeling, like financial modeling tools. We may find
I've-
things that we.
Done that. The tools exist. Python's got such a robust library for
Yeah. Oh, okay.
data. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd probably be something like that. And
Yeah, that makes sense.
that said, as far as like action items go, because we're 6 minutes over for you guys, I think determining what that demand formula might look like, and then also reminding ourselves that we need to consider the sort of like two alternative, non-mutually exclusive revenue models. I think those are like the biggest unknowns for any sort of tokenomic modeling moving forward. Would you guys
Well,
agree or disagree?
I can tell you right now, we definitely want token value accrual, 100%, and that's like sort of, I think, what the process of tokenomic modeling, like that is the end goal of tokenomic modeling, is to design a system that engages in token value accrual, right? That creates value and then accrues that value to the token that's useful in the system. So
do you mean token price or market cap or both?
like I said, it could be both or either, right? Like I mean, like I would say the primary statistic is market cap, but the secondary statistic is price, right? Because like market cap is like if the system is getting more valuable over time, that's good, and the easiest way to judge that is by market cap, not necessarily by price.
Okay.
But market cap is a function of price, right?
Mm-hmm. Price and supply, yeah, exactly. So
Yep. Yeah, personally, I don't really like to be the fee structure because I feel like it's just kind of replicating what we're trying to leave. And it's, of course, I guess we need fees, right? But I don't know. I hope we just don't think, because I think what could happen is 5-10 years down the road, the DAO votes to increase the fees, right? Like I could just see that happening.
it doesn't have to be a votable variable. It could be algorithmic, and it could be a function of what our expenses are, whether it's gas fees or shipping fees or any sort of fee. Like literally just an expense variable, and that just simplifies things so that regardless of macroeconomics and token price and whatnot, like the business itself is not
Yeah, I like that.
bleeding.
I like that because people like the marketplaces and others that build their business on top of this would probably get upset if the fees unexpectedly increases, just like what happens to us in Amazon. If there's a formula or algorithm or justifiable reason, I like that more than just like a DAO vote when the marketplace is fighting in the future about the fees increasing.
Well, I would say also remember that the marketplaces, as we're emitting to marketplaces, they're getting power to vote in the Loadpipe protocol, right? So like the marketplaces, as we emit tokens to them, get more power in choosing what protocol fees are, right? And theoretically, if they're holding the token, right, like they have some differential motives of like they do want the protocol to be successful, so maybe they like fees, but they do want to keep fees low because they're operating a marketplace. But yeah, they'll have some. It won't just be that like that's sort of the whole idea, right? Is that like the protocol won't just decide by some secret council vote. Like the reason why we're like emitting these tokens is to emit power to make decisions within the system. So even if like it does increase, it'll increase with input from market participants, which are marketplaces.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
Thank you.
I guess my response to that would mean the newer marketplaces would have an uphill battle versus the established marketplaces that have been accruing value and power over time. But that's a fair point, though, that they do have a say. I guess we all just ponder on all this. Is there others? I haven't heard
Yeah,
much.
I mean, and
go ahead, Bo.
sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, and part of that is like it's possible to design it with some sort of like diminishing returns to votes, which I tend to like. This is like James and I talked about this in I think the last one-on-one session we had, but like this idea of I really like the microtransaction model that like has a low barrier to buying the game, right? Like games where you have to continue to buy and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars in order to like get the full game is a shitty model to me. To me, it's like there should be like sort of a low barrier to entry, and then any more money spent after that should have some diminishing return. And so I personally would love to see that in a voting system where, yeah, it's like it doesn't like really crowd out new entrants. And once you get to a certain level, right, like you have diminishing returns on your power.
Is there another one? I saw people in ENS complain lately. The cost to make a proposal was pretty high. I mean, is that a part of it? Like to make a proposal, having a certain amount of token and to be able to, is that part of this at all, or thought process, or that's just probably a minor detail?
It's a parameter we're going to have to set when we launch the DAO. Like it's just something that we have. Like the cost of making a proposal is a parameter. It can be adjusted up or down, but yeah, we'll have to come to some initial cost for making a proposal. It could be zero, right? But we also don't want to like allow people to spam proposals. So there should be some cost, but yeah, finding the sweet spot for like how costly it should be, we're not sure.
Okay. All right. Is anyone else want to share something? I guess we're wrapping up, getting close to wrapping up, but I'd love to hear some others that haven't shared much. All right.
Also, I want to.
Oh, Nina, yeah, James.
One-on-one.
Nina has something.
Sorry, I was just gonna quickly say from a marketplace perspective, given the kind of marketplaces it is you think you're going to attract at the onset, the size of these marketplaces, the sizes of the teams, whatever the revenue charging model is going to be, they're going to be probably a little bit more price sensitive than some of the other marketplaces. So the ability to predict whatever their charges are going to be from period to period is going to be essential for them, right? So whatever it is you end up with from a charging methodology, it does have to be relatively simple to understand and I'm going to use the word predict, but they should be able to gauge how much of their costs are going to go towards that. So as we layer more and more, and I get that you can bring these on later, it's just that it would be helpful to remember that from a, let's call it a front-end perspective. So it's simple is better, particularly when you're promising to be transparent about everything. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. If we're charging any sort of fee relative to costs of our business, we should be very transparent to that, even if it's simply just gas fees. And if we absorb that, we should also be transparent in the sort of opposite regard, so they understand like what we're doing for them. Yeah. If we have a negative fee, for example, we should make that very clear so they're happy with us. And yeah, I just want to point out this is an exploration document. None of this is the Bible. I think we're definitely going to change some things based off of the conversation that we had. Moreover, if any of you guys have questions individually or want me to walk you through more of this document, because I think there's quite a bit we didn't discuss, I'm more than happy to make myself available. So, yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, James. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye-bye.